In the coldest place on Earth, where compasses falter and silence swallows every sound, there lies a continent older than memory. Antarctica, vast, white, and forbidden. Beneath its frozen crust are traces of something no one was meant to see. Ancient coastlines, magnetic scars, signals that rise from the deep ice as if the Earth itself were whispering back. For decades, scientists, explorers, and governments have watched this place from a distance, mapping, drilling, and listening, each finding more questions than answers. The radar returns don't behave as they should, the maps don't match the past, and sometimes the ice reveals shapes too perfect to be chance. Tonight, we descend into the last silence, beneath the ice, beneath the treaties, beneath the history we were taught to a vault that has waited longer than civilization itself. Join us as we uncover what may lie beneath the dust of Antarctica. Antarctica's forbidden maps. Traces of cities under the ice. In the frozen silence of Antarctica, a place ruled by wind and ice, something has quietly unsettled historians for decades. It began not with a discovery, but with a map one drawn centuries before the continent was officially found. The Piri Reis map, dated to 1513, showed the northern coastline of Antarctica without ice. It was copied, according to the Turkish admiral who made it, from much older charts, some said to be ancient beyond measure. When modern scientists compared the contours with modern seismic surveys of the land beneath Antarctica's ice, the similarities were difficult to dismiss. It raised a question few dared to ask aloud. How could a 16th century sailor have known what lay under miles of ice? The continent had only entered human knowledge in 1820, when Russian and British expeditions finally confirmed the existence of land beneath the endless white horizon. Yet the Piri Reis map, alongside others, like the Orontius Phineas map of 1531, and the Boache map of 1737, seemed to suggest earlier eyes had seen it. The Orontius Phineas chart went further, depicting rivers, mountains, and bays that seemed to match subglacial features later identified by radar in the 20th century. The Boache map described an Antarctica divided into two large islands, separated by a channel, an image strangely similar to what scientists now believe existed before the last ice age. For some, the maps were evidence of forgotten knowledge, perhaps the remnants of a civilization capable of global navigation long before history began to record such feats. For others, they were the product of coincidence, mistranslation, or imaginative cartography. Yet, in the quiet halls of archives and libraries, the puzzle remained. The ink lines on old parchment seemed to echo something older, something erased by time and ice. In 1959, a study by the US Air Force's cartographic section examined the Piri Reis map in detail. The analysts concluded that the southern portion of the map, labelled Antarctica, indeed represented the Queen Maud Land coast, and that it appeared to be depicted as ice-free. This was not supposed to be possible. Geological evidence suggested the last time the coastline had been ice-free was at least 6,000 years ago, long before known civilizations like Egypt or Sumer had begun. The analysts noted that the accuracy of longitudinal placement was exceptional for the era, suggesting advanced understanding of spherical trigonometry. Yet such methods were not documented in Europe until centuries later. Theories began to form quietly in academic corners. Some proposed that the maps preserved knowledge from ancient seafaring cultures now lost to time, perhaps predating recorded history by tens of thousands of years. The French cartographer Philippe Boache claimed he had compiled his Antarctic map from even older sources, maps from before the deluge. He believed an ancient people must have charted the world's oceans when climates were different and the poles not yet locked in ice. By the mid-20th century, as aerial surveys and radar imaging revealed the hidden contours of the continent, comparisons became more precise. The Orontius Phineas map's representation of river valleys and coastal inlets seemed to align with regions under East Antarctica's ice sheet. Some geologists at the time, including those affiliated with the U.S. Navy's Operation High Jump 1946-47, were privately intrigued. Though no official link was ever acknowledged, rumors grew that the U.S. had undertaken flights across the interior to verify certain geophysical anomalies hinted at by ancient cartography. Beneath the Antarctic ice, the terrain is far from featureless. Radar mapping has revealed vast mountain ranges, the Gamburtsev Mountains buried under 2 miles of ice. Lakes sealed for millions of years, such as Lake Vostok, stretch for hundreds of miles beneath frozen layers. The idea that entire geological features could be hidden from view led some researchers to wonder what else might remain unseen. The maps, they argued, might not be literal guides, but faint memories of landscapes once open and alive. In 1960, Charles Hapgood, a historian at Keene State College, published maps of the ancient sea kings. His work revived the mystery of the Piri Reis map for a new generation. Hapgood suggested that Earth's crust might have shifted suddenly around 10,000 BCE, displacing entire continents and altering climates overnight. If such a shift had exposed Antarctica's coast in ancient times, then perhaps those who drew the original charts had mapped it before it froze. Albert Einstein, shortly before his death in 1955, corresponded with Hapgood, calling his hypothesis an original, though not necessarily correct, idea. Skeptics argued that the resemblance between ancient maps and Antarctica's true shape was superficial. They noted that many old maps were composites, merging information from multiple sources and guesses about unknown regions. Yet even they conceded that certain details, such as the shape of the Palmer Peninsula, were difficult to explain by chance alone. Today, the Piri Reis map is kept in the Topkapı Palace Library in Istanbul. Its edges are frayed, its colours faded. The annotations in Ottoman Turkish describe lands of warmth, animals, and vegetation, and Antarctica without ice. For many who study it, the greatest mystery is not whether it shows the southern continent, but how such knowledge could exist so early. If the mapmakers did indeed possess information from an earlier epoch, where did that knowledge come from, and who had the means to preserve it through centuries of darkness? The quiet persistence of these maps has kept the question alive. They sit in glass cases and digital archives, studied by geographers, dismissed by historians, and reinterpreted by those who believe humanity's past is deeper than written history admits. In the white silence of Antarctica, radar continues to trace the unseen. The ice covers mountains, valleys, and perhaps beneath all that weight, the last traces of something that once looked very different. No one can yet say for certain what the old maps represent, but each line of ink, drawn by forgotten hands, continues to suggest that the world we think we discovered may have already been known long before our history began to write its first words. The ice that remembers. When radar first pierced Antarctica's surface in the 1,950 seconds, the instruments revealed a world no one had imagined still existed. Beneath 2 miles of solid ice lay entire mountain chains, valleys, and basins landscapes as complex as any on the visible continents. The discovery came quietly through the work of scientists mapping the bedrock as part of the International Geophysical Year in 1957-1958. They called one of the first major findings the Gamburtsev Mountains, a massive, hidden range roughly the size of the European Alps, buried deep beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet. These mountains, invisible from the surface, appeared ancient, weathered, and once alive with rivers. The Gamburtsev discovery puzzled geologists. Mountains form through tectonic movement, but for a range this old to remain so sharply defined under so much ice, it would need to have been sealed rapidly, protected from erosion for tens of millions of years. In 1959, British and Soviet teams compared seismic readings, confirming the range's existence and elevation. The results showed valleys and ridges, suggesting glacial action before the ice itself sealed them away. It was as though Antarctica had once looked like modern Patagonia rock, river, and green valleys, before an abrupt shift buried it in white. In 1974, an American-British survey detected a vast depression under the ice, known now as Lake Vostok. Stretching 160 miles in length and 30 miles wide, it remains one of the largest subglacial lakes on Earth, sealed off for at least 15 million years. Temperatures there never rise above freezing, yet pressure and geothermal heat prevent the water from solidifying. The lake lies beneath more than 2 miles of ice, its surface unseen, its ecosystem untouched. Russian scientists at Vostok Station drilled for decades before breaching the upper layers in 2012. What they recovered was ancient water containing microbial life unlike any known species, surviving in complete isolation and darkness. This discovery reignited speculation about what else might lie hidden beneath the ice. The radar images taken over the years revealed not just single lakes, but entire networks of them, connected by channels and subglacial rivers spanning hundreds of miles. In 2006, data from NASA's ICESat mission identified more than 145 subglacial lakes pulsing in cycles, draining and refilling as though the continent breathed through its frozen crust. These movements caused surface shifts detectable by satellite slow, rhythmic changes like the heartbeat of something deep and old. Scientists began referring to Antarctica's hidden structures as ghost topography. The term described ancient river systems and mountain valleys preserved under the ice, remnants of climates that vanished millions of years ago. Some radar readings even showed what appeared to be straight lines, geometric depressions, and grid-like formations beneath certain areas of Queen Maud Land and Wilkes Land. Most geologists attributed these to natural fracturing or data artifacts. Others, especially in fringe circles, argued they might be the traces of something artificial old foundations buried beneath the ice and stone. In 2001, NASA satellites detected a magnetic anomaly beneath Wilkes Land, east of the continent's central dome. Measuring over 150 miles in diameter, the anomaly showed a dense mass under the crust, perhaps the remains of a massive asteroid impact. Yet alternative theorists proposed something different. The anomaly could mark the remnants of an ancient city, frozen and compressed over countless millennia. These claims were never accepted by mainstream science, but they persisted in quiet corners of research communities and alternative history forums. The idea that the ice could preserve more than natural features, that it could hold structures or traces of human presence, remained a silent undercurrent in the study of the continent. Even with the most advanced radar and satellite imaging, only fragments of the hidden land are visible. The bedrock beneath East Antarctica, in particular, shows patterns of erosion and uplift that suggest flowing water once carved it freely. If the ice were removed, scientists estimate the continent would reveal plains, lakes, and deltas, resembling a prehistoric landscape. Some areas, such as Dome Sea and Vostok Basin, might have once been temperate. Fossilized pollen, marine diatoms, and traces of tropical flora found in core samples support the theory that Antarctica was not always frozen. It was once green, possibly forested, part of the ancient supercontinent Gondwana before continental drift carried it south. During the 2018 Beyond Epica drilling project, scientists extracted ice cores stretching back 1.5 million years. Each layer held microscopic clues: dust, pollen, trapped air bubbles, preserving atmospheric records from long before modern humans existed. Within these silent archives, they found evidence of rapid warming and cooling cycles, hinting that Antarctica's freeze was not gradual, but sudden, as though triggered by a shift in Earth's axis or orbit. To geologists, these records explained the shaping of global climate. To others, they whispered of a forgotten catastrophe that sealed an entire world beneath ice. Antarctica's ice acts like an immense library, its pages frozen, its language made of isotopes and minerals. Every drilling expedition reads a little more of its history, but vast chapters remain locked away. In 2021, radar mapping teams from the British Antarctic Survey detected a massive buried canyon system under the ice, deeper than the Grand Canyon and hundreds of miles long. It cut across the continent, invisible to all but the instruments that traced density and reflection. These findings reshaped scientific understanding of Antarctica's interior, its hidden rivers, its lost valleys, its possible life forms sealed in darkness. The silence of the ice has outlasted civilizations. It remembers climates, oceans, and perhaps, as some quietly suggest, things humanity has forgotten. When explorers speak of drilling deeper, they are not only searching for scientific answers, they are reaching into geological memory, pressing against the edge of time itself. Beneath their feet lies a continent that once may have looked like the world before history, a place that keeps its own record, written in layers no human eye has seen. The deeper they drill, the more the ice seems to whisper back. It does not reveal, it remembers. Operation High Jump. In August 1946, the United States Navy launched one of the largest Antarctic expeditions in history. It was called Operation High Jump, officially designated the United States Navy Antarctic Developments Program. Under the command of Rear Admiral Richard Evelyn Byrd, it consisted of 4,700 personnel, 13 ships, and 33 aircraft. The mission's stated goal was to establish the Antarctic Research Base, known as Little America 4, train personnel in polar conditions, and test new equipment for cold weather warfare. Yet the scale of the operation, military in size, scientific in name, soon became a source of speculation that outlived its official reports. The fleet departed from Norfolk, Virginia, on the 2nd of December 1946. It included aircraft carriers, destroyers, and supply ships, all traveling south toward the Ross Sea. Officially, the operation was a peacetime training mission designed to strengthen American presence in the polar region after World War II. But unspoken motives ran deeper. The early Cold War was beginning, and the United States sought strategic advantage in all unexplored frontiers, including the poles. The Antarctic was a blank space on global maps, a place where reconnaissance, mineral surveys, and aviation tests could be conducted without interference. Byrd's flagship, the USS Mount Olympus, led the central group. Icebreakers Burton Island and Edisto followed, carving paths through the pack ice. The aircraft carrier Philippine Sea carried Martin PBM Mariner, flying boats, and Douglas R-4D Skytrain aircraft, modified for polar landings. The fleet divided into Eastern, Western, and Central task forces, each tasked with aerial reconnaissance and mapping of unexplored areas. Operation High Jump began in earnest on the 31st of December 1946, as planes lifted off from floating ice runways and ship decks to photograph the frozen continent below. Over 220,000 aerial photographs were taken within 3 months, covering an estimated 60% of the Antarctic coastline. But the mission was not without tragedy. On the 30th of January 1947, a PBM Mariner aircraft designated George 1 crashed near Thurston Island during a whiteout, killing 3 crewmen. The survivors endured sub-zero temperatures for days before rescue teams found them. The official report listed the cause as mechanical failure. But later, accounts described strange compasses, erratic radio signals, and blinding atmospheric phenomena, details that would feed later conspiracy theories. Byrd himself was no stranger to mystery. His earlier Antarctic expeditions in 1929 and 1934 had already earned him a reputation for ambition and secrecy. He had claimed to fly over the North Pole in 1926, though his flight records remain debated. In 1947, after returning from Operation High Jump, newspapers in Chile and Argentina published interviews attributed to Byrd, in which he allegedly warned of flying objects that could move from pole to pole at incredible speeds. The authenticity of these statements has never been verified, but they circulated widely in South America, giving rise to speculation about unidentified aerial phenomena in the polar region. The operation ended abruptly in February 1947, several months earlier than planned. The official explanation cited the onset of winter and worsening conditions. Yet some researchers questioned why such a well-funded mission, with vast resources and global attention, would conclude prematurely. In the years that followed, whispers grew that the fleet had encountered something unexpected. Some suggested secret German bases hidden under the ice remnants of wartime expeditions conducted by Nazi Germany in 1938 and 1939. Others claimed Byrd's fleet had stumbled upon technology not of human origin. The German Antarctic expedition of 1938-39, led by Alfred Richer aboard the ship Schwabenland, had indeed mapped parts of Queen Maud Land using aircraft and aerial cameras. The area they surveyed was named Neuschwabenland. Decades later, declassified wartime documents confirmed that the expedition aimed to claim territory for whaling and potential mineral resources, not to build hidden bases. Yet the overlap between Richer's mapped region and areas later photographed during Operation High Jump fueled the belief that Byrd's team may have revisited the same coordinates for reasons beyond geology. One of the more persistent claims came from the so-called Byrd Diary, first published in the 1990 seconds by anonymous sources. It described a secret flight into the interior of Antarctica, where Byrd allegedly encountered lush valleys and warm air currents. The diary included references to an inner world and advanced craft. Historians have dismissed it as a modern fabrication, noting the lack of verifiable provenance. Still, the idea found resonance among those convinced that Antarctica's ice concealed far more than ice and stone. Behind the layers of rumour, Operation High Jump did leave a tangible legacy. The data collected during those months formed the foundation for later Antarctic research and mapping efforts. The photographs helped identify mountain ranges, ice shelves, and potential base sites for future expeditions. The operation also tested new methods of aerial navigation using sun compasses and radio altimeters technologies critical for Cold War reconnaissance flights. But the official documentation remains incomplete. Many of the mission's detailed logs and navigational reports were classified for decades under national security restrictions. When portions were declassified in the 1980 seconds, they showed meticulous scientific detail, but also gaps, missing days, and abrupt terminations of flight logs. To those seeking hidden meanings, the absences seem to say more than the text itself. When Admiral Byrd died in 1957, he left behind thousands of pages of journals, maps, and expedition notes. Among them were entries that reflected his lifelong fascination with the unknown. "The poles," he once wrote, "are the gateways to the past and the future." Whether meant as metaphor or literal insight, those words became part of the legend surrounding Operation High Jump, a mission remembered not only for what it accomplished, but for what it may have concealed. Today, researchers revisit Byrd's routes using satellite data, finding that many of the coordinates once explored correspond to geological anomalies still unexplained. Under layers of secrecy and speculation, Operation High Jump endures as the moment when the modern world's eyes turned fully toward Antarctica and saw more than ice. The Nazi expeditions, In December 1938, as Europe edged towards war, a specially equipped German vessel left Hamburg under the command of Captain Alfred Richer. The ship, the MS Schwabenland, carried 2 Dornier Wall flying boats, large catapults for launching them, and a crew of scientists, cartographers, and naval officers. Its destination was the southernmost edge of the world, Antarctica. The mission was presented publicly as a scientific expedition to secure new whaling grounds for Germany's growing industry. But within its sealed compartments were instruments and objectives that extended beyond biology or cartography. The Schwabenland reached the coast of Queen Maud Land in January 1939, navigating through heavy pack ice and frigid winds. The area was chosen for its accessibility from the Atlantic and its relatively mild weather during the austral summer. Over the next few weeks, the crew conducted a series of aerial surveys, launching the Dornier aircraft from the ship's deck by compressed air catapult and retrieving them by crane when they returned. Each flight carried automatic cameras capable of capturing 20,000 square kilometers of terrain per mission. In total, more than 600,000 square kilometers were photographed, an extraordinary achievement for the time. The expedition named the region Neuschwabenland after their home province of Swabia. The German team planted aluminum spears topped with swastikas in the ice and claimed the territory for the Reich. They mapped mountain ranges, glaciers, and ice-free oases along the coast. Some of these oases, such as the Schirmacher Oasis, appeared unusual. Warm air currents created by underground geothermal activity had kept sections of the terrain free of snow, forming lakes surrounded by exposed rock. For the scientists who landed there briefly, the sight was surreal: bare earth and liquid water in the middle of Antarctica. Samples of soil, algae, and freshwater organisms were collected, and temperature readings taken. These oases would later become central to conspiracy theories that flourished long after the expedition ended. In official records, the mission was a success. The expedition returned to Hamburg in April 1939 with crates of photographic negatives, meteorological data, and biological specimens. The material was handed over to the Deutsche Gesellschaft für Polarforschung, the German Society for Polar Research, and portions were published in technical journals before the outbreak of war halted further exploration. Yet the rapid militarization of Germany that same year gave the expedition a darker context. Some researchers believe it served dual purposes: public science on one hand, and covert reconnaissance for potential resource extraction or hidden installations on the other. By 1945, as the war collapsed, rumors began circulating among Allied intelligence officers that German submarines had fled to secret bases in Antarctica. The stories varied. Some claimed these bases stored advanced weapon prototypes, others that they served as escape routes for high-ranking officials. British and US naval records do confirm that several U-boats, most notably U-530 and U-977, surrendered months after the German capitulation, having arrived from unknown locations in the South Atlantic. Their logs contained vague entries about refueling stops and course deviations south of Cape Verde. When questioned, the crews denied ever approaching Antarctica, yet the absence of full documentation left questions unanswered. The overlap between these rumors and the 1938-39 expedition fueled a body of post-war speculation that persists today. By the early 1952s, stories emerged of Base 211, an alleged underground complex built beneath the ice of Neuschwabenland during or after the expedition. Theories claimed it was supplied by long-range submarines, and that engineers had constructed air vents and hangars within the coastal mountains. Declassified intelligence reports from 1945-47 show that both the US and UK briefly investigated these claims, fearing the survival of Nazi leadership abroad. No evidence was ever found, but the persistence of secrecy surrounding Antarctic operations gave such tales a long life. Admiral Richard Byrd's Operation High Jump in 1946–47, which followed only a few years after the war, was often tied to these same narratives. Some claimed Byrd's sudden withdrawal from Antarctica was due to a confrontation with remnants of the German expedition or with technology beyond known capability. These stories were unsupported by official records, but found traction among those who noticed that both the German and American missions had targeted the same region, Queen Maud Land. In 1952, the German magazine Neue Illustrierte published an article titled Hitler lebt, Hitler lives, suggesting that the Führer had escaped to an Antarctic fortress built before the war. Though entirely speculative, the story blended fragments of truth, such as Richter's expedition, with imaginative extrapolation. Over time, it merged with Cold War anxieties, turning Antarctica into a canvas for projection. Soviet commentators accused the United States of using Antarctic bases for secret weapons. American tabloids claimed the Soviets were hunting Nazi remnants under the ice. Both nations, in reality, were conducting routine geophysical research. Declassified archives from the Reichsmarine and the Ahnenerbe, the SS's pseudo-scientific research branch, show that several proposals for a permanent polar station had indeed been drafted in 1939. The documents discussed the logistical challenges of constructing prefabricated shelters in extreme cold and the potential to exploit guano and mineral deposits for fertilizer production. No evidence suggests these plans were ever realized. Yet the paper trail of ambition, secrecy, and advanced engineering during that era gave later generations fertile ground for myth-making. Modern historians view the Schwabenland expedition as a sophisticated but short-lived scientific project, designed to assert German presence in the Antarctic rather than to establish colonies. The photographic negatives preserved in Berlin and Hamburg archives have been reanalyzed using modern techniques. They reveal detailed panoramas of ice shelves, coastal rock, and glacial flow, all consistent with known geography. There are no visible structures or signs of habitation. Still, for those drawn to the mystery, the lack of definitive closure continues to be interpreted as proof of concealment rather than absence. In 2013, Norwegian researchers revisited the Schermacker oasis using satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar. They confirmed the geothermal anomalies first noted by Richter's team and found small freshwater lakes still free of ice. The region now hosts India's Maitree Station, one of several modern research bases operating in the same area once photographed by the Germans. Scientists drilling core samples there detected organic residues dating back thousands of years, proving that parts of Antarctica had been ice-free during previous interglacial periods. To historians of science, this continuity underscores how early explorers, German, Norwegian, British, and later American, were all part of a longer, shared pursuit of knowledge in the planet's most hostile environment. Yet the name Neuschwabenland endures in circles far removed from academic geography. Online archives, speculative documentaries, and fringe publications continue to describe underground installations, magnetic anomalies, and frozen technology lying dormant beneath its mountains. In 2018, a series of high-resolution radar scans, released by the European Space Agency, showed dense subglacial formations in the same sector interpreted by geologists as buried rock formations, but by others as potential structures. Each discovery, no matter how ordinary, becomes fuel for a story that refuses to die. The Schwabenland herself was decommissioned after the war, her name fading into history, but her voyage left behind a strange afterimage, a convergence of real exploration and imagined continuity. For those who see in Antarctica a mirror of forgotten epochs, the German expedition remains a beginning, an act of intrusion into the last untouched frontier. Whether driven by science, ambition, or something deeper, It marked the moment when the ice became not just a subject of study, but a stage for secrecy. The coordinates charted by Rich's crew in 1939 are still used in Antarctic mapping today. The aluminum spears they planted, if any survived, lie buried under decades of snowfall, their symbols erased by wind. Yet the questions they inspired about what nations sought beneath the ice, and what traces might still endure, continue to echo in every radar sweep and sonar return. The hollow Earth theory. Long before modern science charted the planet's poles, the idea of a hollow Earth circulated quietly among philosophers, explorers, and mystics. It was not born in conspiracy, but in curiosity. The first written suggestion came in the 17th century from the English astronomer Edmund Halley, the same Halley who tracked the comet that bears his name. In 1692, he proposed that Earth might consist of concentric shells separated by luminous atmospheres, each capable of sustaining life. He based this not on imagination, but on unexplained compass readings and magnetic anomalies recorded by early navigators. To Halley, the shifting magnetic poles suggested movement within the planet, a rotation of inner spheres beneath the crust. Halley's theory appeared in the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society, earning polite skepticism rather than ridicule. Over the following century, the idea evolved. In 1818, an American Army officer named John Cleves Sims, Jr., declared that Earth was hollow, with openings at both poles large enough for ships to enter. Sims wrote, "I declare the Earth is hollow, habitable within, containing a number of solid concentric spheres." He petitioned Congress for funding to lead an expedition through the polar openings, promising discovery of fertile lands within. Though denied, his proposal gained attention. Pamphlets, lectures, and newspaper articles spread the idea across the United States. Supporters called themselves Simesians, and his theory became a peculiar fixture of 19th century frontier thought. In 1829, Jeremiah Reynolds, a journalist influenced by Sims, persuaded the US government to sponsor an expedition to the South Pole. It eventually became the United States Exploring Expedition of 1842 under Charles Wilkes, which charted large sections of the Antarctic coastline. Though no polar opening was found, the mission confirmed Antarctica as a continent, ironically closing the door on Sims's dream. Yet the hollow Earth theory survived, adapted by those who saw symbolism rather than science in its core. By the early 20th century, the idea merged with new occult movements. Helena Blavatsky, founder of the Theosophical Society, wrote of subterranean realms inhabited by ancient beings known as Agathons. These writings influenced mystics and nationalists in Germany, where speculative geography blended with myth and ideology. Secret societies such as the Thule and Vril groups claimed access to knowledge of hidden worlds beneath the poles, worlds connected to ancient civilizations or extraterrestrial origins. These beliefs, though fringe, later intertwined with rumors about Nazi expeditions to Antarctica and alleged contact with advanced beings from within the Earth. In 1947, just months after the conclusion of Operation High Jump, Admiral Richard E. Byrd became the unintentional figurehead of a modern Hollow Earth legend. A document circulated decades later, purporting to be his secret diary, described a flight beyond the South Pole in which he allegedly encountered green valleys, warm air, and unidentified craft emerging from beneath the ice. The diary spoke of an inner world ruled by a superior civilization concerned with humanity's nuclear aggression. Historians have repeatedly confirmed the diary is apocryphal. It contains language and technical references inconsistent with Byrd's known writings, but its timing, shortly after the war and during the early atomic era, gave it cultural weight. The Hollow Earth narrative resurfaced in 1959 when the first detailed seismic readings of Antarctica revealed subglacial mountains and vast cavities beneath the ice sheet. These were natural formations voids caused by geothermal activity and flowing meltwater, but to believers, they were proof. The concept of inner Earth shifted from myth to metaphor for hidden ecosystems and undiscovered realms. Some linked it to reports of mysterious radio signals received during polar expeditions. Others to the magnetic anomalies detected under Wilkes Land. In 1962, science fiction and pseudoscience converged in Raymond Bernard's The Hollow Earth, which cited Bird's supposed encounters as evidence. Bernard's tone was calm and clinical, describing secret entrances at the poles guarded by governments. He suggested that UFOs might originate not from space, but from vast caverns within the Earth. His book circulated among post-war readers fascinated by secrecy, advanced technology, and the unexplored polar regions. By the 1970 seconds, the theory had evolved again, blending with the growing awareness of Antarctica's geological complexity, its subglacial lakes, buried mountain ranges, and volcanic activity beneath the ice. The concept found new life in alternative science circles, where radar scans showing unexplained voids were interpreted as tunnels or chambers. In 2001, satellite-based gravimetric mapping detected a large mass concentration known as a mascon beneath Wilkes Land, possibly the remnant of an asteroid impact. Within weeks, online communities revived the Hollow Earth narrative, claiming the anomaly was the roof of a vast cavity. No physical evidence supports such a claim, yet the idea persists because it mirrors a deep cultural fascination that something hidden lies beneath the planet's surface, waiting to be found. Modern geology describes the Earth as layered rather than hollow, a crust, mantle, and core separated by immense pressure and temperature. Yet even this model leaves room for mystery. Seismologists continue to find low-velocity zones deep within the mantle, regions that behave unpredictably during earthquakes. In 2019, researchers at the University of Maryland identified structures at the core mantle boundary that defy simple classification, denser than the surrounding rock and perhaps remnants of primordial material from Earth's formation. Though unrelated to the Hollow Earth concept, such discoveries remind us that the planet's interior remains largely unknown, accessible only through indirect measurement. Antarctica, as the least explored continent, serves as the stage for both science and imagination. Its vast uninhabited interior, the constant radio silence, and the presence of dozens of international research bases give it an aura of controlled secrecy. When photographs of large ice caves or radar anomalies appear online, they are often presented as entrances. Even legitimate geological phenomena, volcanic vents, crevasses, or collapsed ice domes are reinterpreted as evidence of access points to hidden worlds. In 2018, a team from NASA's Operation Icebridge released radar images of a subglacial cavity the size of Manhattan beneath Thwaites Glacier. The official report described it as a natural void created by melting ice and shifting bedrock. Still, alternative theorists cited it as proof that the inner Earth hypothesis was partly correct, that beneath Antarctica's ice there existed networks of tunnels or chambers sustained by geothermal heat. The scientific and speculative interpretations rarely meet, yet they share a common wonder that beneath the coldest place on Earth, life and history might persist unseen. For mainstream science, the Hollow Earth remains a metaphor, a reflection of human curiosity directed inward. For those who study polar history, it is a reminder of how myth and exploration have always intertwined. The earliest theories of polar openings emerged not from ignorance, but from the limits of technology and imagination. Each expedition, from Sims's dreams to Bird's flights, pushed the boundary between map and mystery a little further. As of today, no evidence supports vast hollow regions or inner civilizations beneath the Antarctic ice. Yet, even now, drilling projects like Beyond Epica and subglacial radar scans continue to reveal cavities, hidden lakes, and unknown microbial life sealed for millions of years. These discoveries, though purely geological, echo the same intuition that drove the earliest explorers, that beneath the ice lies something ancient, something untouched, and perhaps something we were not meant to find so easily. The hollow earth may not exist in form, but as an idea, it endures an unending descent into the unseen, magnetic anomalies and ancient signals. From the beginning of polar exploration, compasses have behaved strangely in Antarctica. Needles swing unevenly, pointing not toward a single pole, but toward scattered regions where the planet's magnetic field twists in unseen ways. These disturbances, first documented by the British Antarctic expedition of 1907, have since grown into one of the continent's enduring mysteries. The ice, it seems, does not merely hide mountains and lakes. It distorts magnetism itself. By the mid-20th century, as military and scientific aircraft crisscrossed the skies above the frozen plateau, unusual electromagnetic readings became common. In 1958, during the International Geophysical Year, U.S. researchers operating near the South Magnetic Pole detected abrupt shifts in magnetic intensity, bursts of high-frequency energy lasting only seconds, followed by complete radio silence. Instruments registered small but measurable oscillations, as if a signal had pulsed from somewhere beneath the ice. The anomalies repeated intermittently for months, always within the same coordinates, near Wilkes Land. The Wilkes Land anomaly remains one of the largest magnetic disturbances ever recorded on Earth. Mapped in detail by satellite magnetometers in 2006, it measures roughly 500 kilometers across and lies beneath 4 kilometers of ice. NASA geophysicists suggested it might be caused by a dense mass, perhaps the remnant of a massive asteroid impact. Yet the symmetry of its magnetic profile, nearly circular and unusually stable, has led others to propose a different origin. A 2017 paper by Italian geophysicists noted that the field's strength was inconsistent with known impact signatures, and more closely resembled patterns produced by metallic or artificial materials. Not all disturbances are magnetic. Radio technicians at McMurdo Station have long reported echo returns from deep within the continent reflections that should not exist. In 1965, a team conducting long-range radio experiments from Byrd Station received what appeared to be repeated signals on a closed transmission band. The echo delay suggested the source was several hundred kilometers beneath their antennas. The findings were never published in full, but internal reports mention structured modulation and non-random repetition. The equipment was checked, recalibrated, and tested again. The pattern persisted, though weaker, before fading entirely. A decade later, in 1979, the Soviet Vostok station recorded a different anomaly while conducting magnetotelluric surveys of the ice sheet. Their instruments detected a distinct low-frequency resonance that seemed to emanate from beneath Lake Vostok, a soundless hum translated into oscillating lines on paper. Soviet scientists theorized it was a natural phenomenon caused by fluid movement under pressure. Others quietly noted the periodicity of the signal, roughly every 16 hours, steady and precise, like a mechanical cycle. As technology advanced, so did the precision of these measurements. In 1999, NASA's ICESat mission, equipped with magnetometer payloads, mapped multiple localized distortions across East Antarctica. Most were small, transient, and likely caused by geological magnetite deposits, but one again near Wilkes Land was unusually deep, extending into the crust and maintaining a fixed polarity despite Earth's natural magnetic drift. When researchers modeled its structure, they found a dome-shaped field consistent with something large and conductive embedded in bedrock. The finding was published quietly in geophysical research letters, without speculation. Over time, a pattern emerged. Many of the strongest magnetic anomalies aligned with subglacial topography, especially regions containing buried mountains or suspected meteorite craters. This alignment led some to argue that the anomalies could be explained entirely by natural processes. Yet fringe researchers continued to connect them with ancient cartographic puzzles, pointing out that many coordinates overlapped with features depicted in early maps such as those by Orontius Phineas and Boische. The suggestion was simple but provocative, that what modern instruments perceive as geophysical anomalies might be traces of something once visible on an ice-free continent. The mystery deepened in 2018, when a joint European-American research flight detected bursts of ultra-low-frequency electromagnetic waves above Dome C. The waves did not originate from space, nor from any known terrestrial transmitter. They rose vertically, then curved back down, forming what scientists called a waveguide loop. The data was forwarded to the European Space Agency for further analysis. Publicly, the explanation given was a combination of solar particle interaction and atmospheric resonance. But within weeks, amateur analysts, comparing the readings to archived Vostok data, noticed the same 16-hour rhythm first reported in 1979. Antarctica's magnetic landscape is unlike any other on Earth. The South Magnetic Pole itself moves constantly, drifting more than 40 kilometers per year toward the Indian Ocean. Beneath this shifting surface field lies a deeper, slower pattern regions of residual magnetism locked into the crust long before the continent froze. Some scientists propose that these zones record the positions of ancient poles from earlier geological epochs, evidence of continental drift over millions of years. Others see them as natural archives of the planet's memory, a magnetic fossil record written into stone and ice. In recent years, autonomous drones and sub-ice radar systems have added new layers of data. The British Antarctic Survey's Polar Gap project in 2019 identified anomalous feedback signals returning from depths greater than the radar's expected penetration range. Engineers attributed them to instrument error, yet the echoes were so regular, appearing every 22 minutes, that they were logged and archived for independent review. When replayed in fast sequence, the waveforms formed repeating shapes, almost geometric. The pattern's origin remains officially unresolved. For geophysicists, Antarctica is a laboratory of extremes: intense cold, dense crust, and complex magnetic layering. Each anomaly demands explanation, and most have one variations in mineral content, solar interference, equipment limitations. But the persistence of deep, coherent signals across decades continues to provoke curiosity. Why do certain frequencies recur? Why do some areas resonate as if hollow or metallic? These are questions that data alone cannot yet answer. Researchers at Concordia Station currently monitor a series of magnetometers designed to record continuous field fluctuations through the long polar night. The data is transmitted by satellite in narrow windows of communication. In 2024, several readings showed short spikes that mirrored the 1,958 and 1,979 anomalies brief, pulse distortions in the 0.1 Hz range. Each lasted less than 2 seconds. Their cause remains unclassified. In the vast stillness of Antarctica, such signals fade quickly, absorbed by the atmosphere and ice. But every generation of explorers rediscovers them in new forms: lines on a graph, static on a receiver, a faint pulse that should not be there. Whether caused by natural forces, buried metals, or something older beneath the crust, these anomalies remind us that even in the most remote corner of the Earth, the planet still speaks in frequencies we barely understand. Beneath the magnetized silence, something continues to hum. The banned zones. Antarctica, often described as the last unclaimed frontier, is also one of the most tightly controlled regions on Earth. Since 1959, the continent has been governed by the Antarctic Treaty, a document signed initially by 12 nations, including the United States, the Soviet Union, and the United Kingdom. It prohibits military activity, resource extraction, and permanent settlement. On paper, it represents the triumph of peace and science. But beneath that idealism lies another reality. Vast sectors of the continent remain off-limits, closed to journalists, civilians, and even many researchers. These are the places known unofficially as the banned zones. The existence of restricted areas in Antarctica is not a rumor, it is a matter of record. The treaty itself allows for the designation of specially protected areas meant to preserve fragile ecosystems or historical sites. Today, there are over 70 such zones scattered across the continent. Some protect penguin colonies or old expedition huts. Others, however, are sealed for reasons not easily explained. Access to these sites requires multiple layers of approval, and even then, permits are rarely granted. In most cases, there is little public documentation about what lies inside. One of the most mysterious examples is the region surrounding Lake Vostok in East Antarctica. As one of the largest subglacial lakes on Earth, sealed beneath nearly 4 kilometers of ice, Vostok has been the focus of international research for decades. Yet, despite its scientific importance, the lake and its immediate surroundings are strictly controlled. Russian teams maintain the only permanent base nearby. When drilling reached the lake's surface in 2012, operations were halted without explanation for several months. When activity resumed, samples were reportedly contaminated, and later reports described the discovery of unusual bacterial strains unrelated to any known lineage. These findings were quietly retracted from official publications. The scientific reason given: laboratory error. Satellite images taken over the area have revealed faint geometric patterns in the ice-long, linear formations stretching for several kilometers. Though likely caused by wind and melt dynamics, they have been interpreted by some as signs of buried structures. Attempts to fly drones over the lake have been repeatedly denied under environmental protocol. Russian researchers rarely release raw data, and American scientists have been limited to collaborative roles. The restricted nature of the site, coupled with its immense subglacial depth, has made Lake Vostok a focal point for speculation about what might exist beneath. Another restricted zone lies near the Queen Maud Land region, the same territory once explored by the German Schwabenland expedition in 1939. It is an area rich in magnetic anomalies, with rugged mountains jutting through the ice, like ancient fortresses. Modern research stations, Norway's Troll, Germany's Neumayer 3, and India's Maitree operate in proximity, yet certain coordinates between them are marked as no-fly zones. Officially, these restrictions are due to hazardous crevasses and unpredictable weather patterns. However, high-resolution satellite imagery of these sectors is conspicuously blurred in several mapping databases, a practice usually reserved for military installations. When questioned, mapping agencies cite data continuity limitations. In 2016, a group of private explorers from New Zealand attempted to conduct an independent survey near this region under a commercial filming permit. After reaching the coastal entry point, their authorization was abruptly revoked. A diplomatic statement from the Norwegian Polar Institute cited safety and jurisdictional conflicts. Their satellite phone transmissions ceased soon after departure from Cape Town, and the group returned weeks later without explanation. Their footage, according to customs declarations, was confiscated for environmental compliance review. No public record of the footage has surfaced. There are also regions classified as scientific preservation zones, whose coordinates are known only to treaty signatories. One such area lies deep within the Australian Antarctic territory, near Dome Argus, an elevation over 4,000 meters above sea level and one of the coldest places on Earth. It was designated restricted after radar mapping in 2009 detected unexplained heat signatures beneath the ice. The official report attributed the anomaly to localized geothermal activity. Yet subsequent thermal scans by satellites failed to replicate the pattern. The files related to this survey remain sealed under Australia's Environmental Protection Framework, accessible only to high-level scientific administrators. Even the continent's airspace has its mysteries. The Antarctic Treaty Consultative Parties maintain a set of designated flight corridors approved for international operations. Aircraft straying from these paths risk diplomatic violations. Pilots who have flown supply missions report that deviations trigger immediate radio contact from monitoring stations, often automated, occasionally human. In 2018, a Chilean pilot flying a logistics route from Punta Arenas to the South Shetland Islands recorded an encounter with unauthorized signal interference when his navigation system abruptly lost contact over an uninhabited stretch near Marie, Birdland. The log noted electromagnetic disruption inconsistent with solar conditions. The incident was quietly removed from Chile's aviation database within weeks. Marie Birdland itself, covering over 1.5 million square kilometers, is an anomaly among anomalies. It is the largest unclaimed territory on Earth. No nation has declared sovereignty over it. Despite its vast size, only a handful of research expeditions have ever entered its interior. Satellite surveys reveal hundreds of volcanic formations buried beneath its ice. Some, like Mount Takahe, have active geothermal vents, releasing trace gases through fissures. Yet for reasons not entirely clear, large parts of Marie Birdland remain unvisited, with travel permits consistently denied. When questioned, the U.S. National Science Foundation cites environmental risk and logistical impracticality. Throughout the 1,960 seconds and 1,970 seconds, rumors circulated that hidden installations had been constructed under the Antarctic ice remnants of Cold War research projects, deep radar stations, or early warning systems. Some were real. Project Iceworm, for instance, was a US military plan to build missile silos under Greenland's ice cap. Though never realized in Antarctica, it demonstrated how plausible such facilities could be. The idea that certain restricted Antarctic regions might conceal decommissioned or experimental structures persists, reinforced by the secrecy surrounding logistics and data sharing among treaty nations. Modern satellite constellations have made it harder to hide anything on the surface, but not beneath it. In 2021, an analysis of European Space Agency radar imagery identified several void anomalies areas where the ice reflected signals in complex, non-random patterns, as though interrupted by dense geometric layers below. The findings were published in technical format without public interpretation. Independent analysts noted that two of these anomalies coincide with restricted coordinates near Dome Sea and Queen Maud Land. When reporters sought clarification, agency representatives replied that research operations in those areas are classified under national partnerships. The official stance of the Antarctic Treaty Secretariat remains consistent. Restrictions exist solely to protect the environment and ensure safety. Yet the pattern of limited access, redacted data, and withheld imagery has created an atmosphere of quiet mistrust. In a world where nearly every inch of the planet has been scanned and mapped, Antarctica remains an exception, a continent governed not only by law, but by silence. The banned zones continue to expand in small increments each decade, justified by new environmental regulations or safety protocols. Whether these measures conceal hazards, discoveries, or simply the unknown, no outsider can say. The white expanse hides everything evenly, whether mountains, ruins, or memories. What is certain is that the forbidden regions of Antarctica, sealed beneath treaties, ice, and secrecy, remain the most inaccessible places on Earth, where questions drift unanswered like snow over an invisible border, frozen artifacts and lost relics. The ice of Antarctica is not uniform. Beneath the white surface, layers of dust, ash, and debris tell the story of the planet's shifting ages. Scientists who drill deep into these frozen records occasionally bring up more than air bubbles and sediments. Over the decades, scattered reports have described objects, metallic fragments, anomalous fossils, and geometric formations found in places where no human or known geological process should have left them. Most of these accounts appear briefly in technical notes or expedition logs, only to vanish later from publication lists. Yet they continue to reappear, like echoes of a buried archive that refuses to stay silent. The earliest known case dates back to 1958, during the US Antarctic expedition led by Admiral George Dufek, one of the key figures behind Operation Deep Freeze. At a drilling site near the Beardmore Glacier, researchers extracted a core sample from 1,200 meters below the surface. Embedded in the ice was a small object, roughly cylindrical, metallic, and perfectly smooth. It was initially catalogued as a drilling contaminant. However, laboratory inspection showed that its alloy composition, primarily titanium and iridium, did not match any materials used in the equipment. The sample was sealed and sent to a US Navy research facility, after which no public mention of it appeared again. Decades later, retired engineer David Sheldon, who worked on deep freeze logistics, recalled being told to forget the object ever existed. A similar report emerged from the Soviet Vostok station in 1962. During subglacial seismic testing, technicians recovered a black rock from a borehole that emitted weak magnetic signals. Analysis revealed trace amounts of aluminum silicate arranged in unusually regular lattice patterns, more consistent with manufactured ceramics than natural stone. The Soviet journal Priroda briefly listed the find in a table of anomalous mineral inclusions before the issue was withdrawn and reprinted without that entry. Some Western researchers speculated it had been a meteorite fragment. Others, quietly, noted that its internal structure resembled high-temperature industrial ceramics materials not known to occur naturally. By the late 20th century, Antarctica's ice sheets had become a magnet for meteorite hunters. Over 40,000 space rocks have been catalogued there since 1976, preserved in pristine condition by the cold. Yet even among these finds, a few stand apart. The Yamato 74159 meteorite, discovered by Japanese researchers in 1974, contained microscopic metallic spheres arranged in patterns some described as lattice-like. In 1992, a French team analyzing another Antarctic meteorite, ALH 84001, found organic carbon compounds later linked controversially to possible fossilized Martian bacteria. NASA announced the discovery in 1996, sparking worldwide debate. Though later studies suggested the structures were formed by chemical processes, the notion that Antarctica's ice might hold evidence of non-terrestrial life never fully faded. In 2003, satellite imaging from NASA's MODIS instrument detected a peculiar linear ridge protruding from the ice near the Shackleton Range. Measuring over 2 kilometers long and 300 meters wide, it cast sharp angular shadows unlike natural ice formations. The ridge was flagged for geological study, but by the time a British survey team reached the coordinates in 2007, it had been buried under new snowfall. Only fragments of the ridge remained visible. Photographs taken during the expedition were quietly archived without public release. The few that surfaced showed symmetrical patterns in the ice cross-sections resembling corridors. A lesser-known, but often cited incident took place in 2012 during a joint American-Norwegian ground-penetrating radar survey near the Woldat Mountains of Queen Maud Land. The team's instruments detected a dense formation beneath 400 meters of ice, roughly oval, hollow at the center, and surrounded by what appeared to be regular ridges. The official report described it as a complex subglacial geological structure. However, leaked excerpts published by an Argentinian scientific bulletin claimed the radar operators initially thought they had found a metallic dome. The language was removed in subsequent publications. Modern Antarctic research operates under strict data sharing agreements. Raw imagery from satellites or radar systems passes through multiple layers of review before being released to the public. This process, while designed to prevent misinterpretation, has also made it easy for unusual findings to disappear quietly. Environmental agencies cite contamination, technical error, or incomplete verification as reasons for withholding information. For those seeking connections, this selective visibility reinforces the belief that something is being hidden, whether ancient ruins, meteorite debris, or artifacts from a forgotten epoch. Some of these beliefs draw on older accounts. In 1912, members of Robert Falcon Scott's ill-fated Terra Nova expedition reported finding fossilized leaves and wood fragments high in the transantarctic mountains, proof that the continent had once supported forests. Later expeditions found larger impressions, ferns, seeds, and even the bones of amphibians and dinosaurs. The presence of such fossils, preserved for over 250 million years, confirmed that Antarctica was once part of the lush supercontinent Gondwana. But to those who study ancient cartography, the discovery offered another possibility. If the continent had once been ice-free, could remnants of human or pre-human civilization also lie beneath the layers now frozen over it? In the 1,980 seconds, Argentine geologist Ricardo Dalmau reported uncovering unnatural fractures in metamorphic rock samples from the northern Antarctic peninsula. The formations contained parallel grooves evenly spaced, as if cut by machinery. His photographs were presented at a 1985 symposium in Buenos Aires, where they drew little attention. Dalmau's later work vanished from archives after his death in 1991. When researchers revisited the samples decades later, they found them catalogued under glacial striations, a natural process caused by ice movement. Still, the precision of the grooves continued to puzzle those who saw them. Digital archives now hold more mysteries than the ice itself. In 2017, several high-resolution satellite images released through Google Earth showed 3 elliptical openings in the snow along the Sur Rondaine Mountains, each roughly 100 meters wide. Within days, the coordinates were blurred. Analysts explain this as an automated artifact caused by cloud shadows. Yet screenshots of the original imagery circulated widely online, fueling theories of entrances to buried structures. The European Space Agency, when questioned, acknowledged the images were real, but misinterpreted due to angle distortion. For mainstream science, Antarctica's so-called relics are geological coincidences amplified by human imagination. Metallic fragments can be meteorites, lattice patterns can be mineral formations, and geometric ridges can result from ice compression. Yet the persistence of these anomalies across decades, nations, and technologies has created an uneasy space between curiosity and secrecy. Each new drilling project seems to uncover something briefly noted and then redacted, as though the ice yields knowledge only reluctantly. In 2022, the Beyond Epica project retrieved ice cores dating back nearly 2 million years. During a routine scan of one core section, technicians recorded a tiny, perfectly circular inclusion of metal embedded in ancient ice layers. Laboratory results confirmed the presence of nickel and chromium, an alloy composition found in modern aerospace materials. The anomaly was officially attributed to microscopic contamination from equipment. Yet for those familiar with the history of polar discoveries, it was another entry in a long, quiet pattern, a trace of something manufactured, sealed in a place untouched by industry. The frozen continent continues to preserve what time has erased elsewhere. Whether these relics belong to ancient civilizations, to cosmic visitors, or simply to the deep geology of the Earth itself, they remain locked within ice that records everything but explains nothing. Every shard, every signal, every buried ridge speaks of a world beneath older, colder, and more patient than our history allows. The Treaty and the Silence. The Antarctic Treaty was signed in Washington, D.C. on the 1st of December 1959. On paper, it was a triumph of diplomacy, a global pact declaring that the coldest, most remote continent would belong to no nation and serve only peaceful and scientific purposes. 12 countries signed it initially, including the United States, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and several that had already staked territorial claims. Over the decades, the number of signatories grew to more than 50. The treaty became one of the few truly international agreements never violated by war. Yet, beneath its calm wording, the treaty established a system of control, an architecture of secrecy that remains intact today. The document forbids military presence, nuclear tests, and the disposal of radioactive waste. It also guarantees freedom of scientific investigation and cooperation. But the fine print includes a phrase easily overlooked: activities shall be subject to inspection by any member nation. This clause, meant to ensure transparency, created a paradox. While countries could theoretically inspect each other's stations, the requirement of mutual notification and logistical dependence made spontaneous observation impossible. Every inspection must be announced months in advance, coordinated through diplomatic channels, and accompanied by host representatives. In practice, the rule became a tool for concealment. By the mid-1960s, the treaty's administrative structure had expanded into a network of consultative meetings, committees, and secretariats. Each country, with a research base, gained a seat in discussions. Reports from scientific projects were submitted annually, but only summaries were made public. Raw data, maps, and geological samples were archived within national repositories. In the name of environmental protection and research coordination, Antarctica became not an open frontier, but a compartmentalized system. The deeper one goes into the continent's administration, the less one finds visible to the outside world. A separate protocol, signed in Madrid in 1991, intensified the restrictions. Known as the Environmental Protection Protocol, it banned all commercial exploitation of Antarctic resources, including mining. The ban is indefinite, but subject to review after 50 years, meaning the moratorium will be reconsidered in 2048. Many scientists and diplomats hailed this as an ecological victory. Yet, within classified policy papers, analysts from multiple countries described another motive: to prevent a geopolitical scramble for resources whose extent was not yet publicly known. Seismic surveys in the 1,980 seconds had revealed vast deposits of coal, oil shale, and possibly natural gas beneath the ice shelves. To keep exploration under control, it was easier to prohibit it entirely and to silence research that touched on the subject. Internal memoranda from the 1,970 seconds, later declassified in fragments, show that several US and Soviet agencies debated establishing dual-use outposts, stations designed for science and communications monitoring. These were never acknowledged as military facilities, but their technical capacity blurred the line. By the 1980 seconds, satellite relay stations and radar domes had been installed near several bases under the pretext of weather monitoring. Today, many of these installations still operate under restricted access, even to visiting scientists from other treaty nations. The system's secrecy extends beyond hardware. Each nation's Antarctic program operates its own review boards, responsible for deciding what data may be released internationally. These boards routinely redact geographic coordinates, raw instrument readings, and imagery deemed environmentally or politically sensitive. When private companies or journalists request information through Freedom of Information channels, they are told that the data belongs collectively to treaty signatories and cannot be disclosed without consensus. This consensus mechanism, requiring unanimous approval, ensures that any single objection can block publication indefinitely. Some of the most curious restrictions involve aerial and satellite imagery. Since the 1970 seconds, large portions of Antarctica have been excluded from public resolution mapping databases. Agencies cite technical reasons: low sun angles, cloud cover, and interference from snow glare. Yet, multiple analysts have observed that the same coordinates appear consistently blurred across different platforms, even when neighboring regions are perfectly clear. These zones frequently coincide with the so-called protected areas, where entry requires multinational approval. No centralized list of these coordinates exists for the public. Every expedition that enters the continent must report to the Council of Managers of National Antarctic Programs, abbreviated COMNAP. This body, headquartered in Christchurch, New Zealand, coordinates logistics, routes, and personnel. Private exploration is technically legal, but almost impossible in practice. All transportation, fuel, and communications must be obtained through national operators, and every aircraft route must be pre-cleared. Even emergency beacons are registered and monitored by central authorities. As a result, no civilian can freely move across Antarctica without leaving a record visible to the treaty system. In recent years, the treaty's silence has deepened through technology. Remote sensors, automatic weather stations, and under-ice probes transmit data directly to government servers via encrypted links. Only processed summaries reach the public. When scientists publish papers based on Antarctic research, they are often prohibited from naming specific coordinates or geological formations. The justification is environmental protection, but the outcome is a quiet redaction of geography, a map with deliberate absences. The political neutrality of Antarctica is often cited as proof of global cooperation. Yet neutrality also means that no journalist, corporation, or independent observer can claim jurisdiction there. When questions arise about the fate of unpublicized discoveries, lost expeditions, or missing samples, they have no legal forum for inquiry. The treaty's signatories answer only to themselves. In 2017, a Chilean delegate to a consultative meeting remarked, "The Antarctic Treaty is not only about peace, it is about managed silence." The comment was struck from the record, but it captured the structure perfectly. The system does not hide behind censorship, it hides behind process. The committees, inspections, and environmental protocols act as layers of ice, each transparent alone, but opaque together. What began as an agreement to preserve science has evolved into one of the most effective information filters in modern history. It prevents exploitation, but also investigation. It allows research, but restricts revelation. The continent at the bottom of the world, remote, inaccessible, and frozen, has become the perfect vault. For those who study the treaty's history, this pattern feels deliberate. Every generation discovers something: an anomaly, a sample, an image, and soon after it is folded into bureaucracy, reclassified, and forgotten. The silence holds. The Antarctic Treaty endures, renewed every few years without revision, each nation reaffirming its commitment to peace. And yet, in that peace, the questions grow deeper. What knowledge lies beneath the administrative ice? What secrets have been preserved not by nature, but by agreement? The ancient builders beneath the ice. Long before the continent we call Antarctica was entombed in ice, it stood in a different world. Fossil evidence from the transantarctic mountains, petrified wood, ferns, and amphibian bones shows that some 100 million years ago, the region was temperate, even forested. Rivers ran through valleys now sealed beneath glaciers. But in recent decades, radar imaging, ancient cartography, and oral traditions from distant civilizations have combined to raise a larger, more unsettling question. Was Antarctica once home to intelligent life? Perhaps even an advanced culture, erased by time and climate? The idea first gained traction in the 1950 seconds, when scholars began comparing the Piri Reis and Orontius Phineus maps with newly obtained seismic profiles of the Antarctic bedrock. The coastal outlines on those Renaissance charts appeared to match the shape of the continent without its ice. For historians of science, this seemed impossible. For others, it hinted at knowledge preserved from a forgotten era, perhaps a civilization that mapped the world before the last ice age, when global sea levels were lower and the poles were ice-free. Charles Hapgood, the American historian who published Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings in 1960, proposed that Antarctica had once supported an organized society capable of global navigation. His Earth crust displacement theory suggested that a sudden geological shift moved the continent to its current polar position around 10,000 BCE, freezing its cities in place. Mainstream geologists rejected Hapgood's hypothesis, but his questions lingered. During the 1,970 seconds, as radar from aircraft and satellites penetrated deeper beneath the ice, several discoveries seemed to echo his claims. Subglacial scans of Queen Maud Land revealed geometric formations, rectilinear ridges, and grid-like depressions buried under hundreds of meters of ice. Official reports classified them as erosional patterns or fractured bedrock. Yet the precision of some alignments, running nearly parallel for several kilometers, drew attention from researchers outside academic circles, who saw in them the outline of ancient foundations. In 1994, a European satellite mission known as ERS-1 mapped the bedrock topography of East Antarctica using radar altimetry. Among the many mountains concealed below the ice, one cluster near the Gamburtsev Range appeared unusually symmetrical. When data were translated into three-dimensional models, the shapes resembled terraced pyramids stepped, evenly angled, and aligned roughly along a north-south axis. Geologists explained this as a coincidence of ice flow and radar shadowing. Nevertheless, photographs of the exposed peaks known as the Antarctic Pyramids circulated widely. Their appearance, triangular summits emerging from the snow, distant and silent, became a symbol for the idea of lost builders beneath the ice. The notion of prehistoric Antarctic architecture draws strength from global myth. Nearly every ancient civilization describes a vanished land at the bottom of the world. Plato's Timaeus and Critias speak of Atlantis, an island empire destroyed by floods and earthquakes. In Hindu cosmology, there is Shveta-dweepa, the White Island, home of the gods. The Hopi of North America tell of earlier worlds buried under ice, while Polynesian legends describe ancestral homelands that sank beneath southern seas. These stories may be allegory, or they may be fragmented memories of real geological catastrophes recorded through oral tradition. Modern oceanographic data show that around 12,800 BCE, the planet experienced a sudden cooling event known as the Younger Dryas. Global temperatures dropped sharply, glaciers advanced, and sea levels fluctuated violently. Ice cores from Antarctica confirm that the change was rapid, perhaps within a human lifetime. If advanced societies existed in coastal regions during that period, they would have been obliterated or displaced. Some researchers suggest that remnants of their knowledge astronomy, geometry, navigation were carried northward, resurfacing thousands of years later in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Mesoamerica. In 2002, a joint Russian-British drilling project at Lake Vostok retrieved samples of mineral sediments trapped at the bottom of the lake. Amid the expected diatoms and microfossils, analysts reported traces of highly ordered silicate structures, fragments that resembled artificial composites. The results were never formally published. The explanation given was laboratory contamination. But rumors spread among scientific staff that the team had encountered crystalline fragments too uniform to be natural. Similar claims resurfaced in 2013 when satellite radar identified hexagonal surface patterns above the same region, likely caused by wind stress, but visually identical to engineered tiling when viewed from orbit. Further west, in the Ellsworth Mountains, a Chilean research group uncovered a granite formation whose internal layering suggested it had been cut and repositioned in antiquity. The blocks, measuring several meters across, formed interlocking patterns resistant to ice pressure. Petrographic tests dated the granite to 500 million years ago, yet the fractures appeared relatively fresh, as if reshaped long after formation. Officially, the site was logged as an example of freeze-thaw weathering. Unofficially, photographs were compared to megalithic walls in Cusco and Baalbek, showing a startling visual resemblance. Such parallels remain speculative, but they raise a recurring question. Why do geometric and architectural forms appear repeatedly in natural formations under Antarctica's ice? Is it pattern recognition, the human tendency to impose structure on chaos, or evidence of forgotten design? The continent's secrecy ensures that few can test these ideas. Research flights over key areas are limited, satellite data are often degraded, and ground expeditions require multinational authorization. The result is a landscape known mostly through filtered images and partial readings, an ideal ground for mystery to thrive. Some theorists argue that the builders may not have been human in the conventional sense. They point to legends of the Agartha, or antediluvian engineers, being said to have lived before the last cataclysm, mastering technologies that manipulated magnetism and stone. In these myths, the poles are gateways, and Antarctica is their buried capital. While such notions sit far outside established science, they persist because the continent itself remains largely unseen. Less than 1% of its subglacial terrain has been explored directly. The rest lies under 2 miles of ice, untouched since long before recorded history began. For archaeologists, the evidence remains circumstantial. No tools, inscriptions, or cultural artifacts have been verified, but radar imagery continues to reveal anomalies that invite curiosity. In 2020, an Italian radar study detected a rectangular formation nearly 12 kilometers wide beneath Princess Elizabeth Land. Density models indicated a composite of rock and ice denser than surrounding bedrock. The team described it cautiously as a localized lithospheric uplift of unclear origin. Outside observers called it a buried complex. If there were ever builders in Antarctica, their legacy now sleeps beneath a pressure that would crush stone into memory. The ice preserves everything, yet shows nothing. Whether these formations are geological coincidence or the remnants of something older, they form part of a silent architecture, one measured not in bricks, but in unanswered questions. The frozen continent remains the perfect museum, a vault whose exhibits cannot be seen, only inferred. The ice holds its secrets, as it always has, patiently, without language, waiting for someone to ask again who built the first world, and what it looked like before the cold came. The melting frontier. In the last few decades, Antarctica has begun to change faster than any other place on Earth. The continent once seen as immovable and eternal locked in silence, and ice now shifts, melts, and reveals fragments of a world long hidden. Scientists track these changes through satellites, core samples, and drones. Yet, behind the charts and models, a quieter awareness has grown. The continent is waking. Beneath the retreating glaciers, valleys, rocks, and shapes, once sealed for millions of years, are surfacing for the first time in human history. The earliest warnings came in the 1970 seconds, when temperature records at research stations like Halley Bay and McMurdo began showing gradual rises. By the 1990 seconds, satellite altimetry confirmed the thinning of the West Antarctic ice sheet. In 2002, the Larsen B ice shelf, an expanse larger than Rhode Island, collapsed in a single season. The disintegration released icebergs and debris into the Weddell Sea, exposing stretches of coastline unseen since the Pleistocene. Scientists aboard the research vessel Polarstern described dark rock faces, patterned ridges, and unexpected sediment layers that suggested open ground beneath the ice far earlier than previously believed. Satellite imagery has since turned the continent into a kind of living map, revealing a landscape of motion. Every year, glaciers like Pine Island and Thwaites retreat dozens of meters, their meltwater carving hidden rivers under the ice. These rivers feed vast subglacial lakes, some the size of small seas, which drain and refill cyclically breathing systems within the frozen crust. As the ice thins, new topographic details appear, ancient deltas, ridges, and channels, forming patterns too deliberate to ignore. Scientists attribute them to the flow of prehistoric water systems. Others see in them something older, perhaps the fossilized outline of a civilization erased by ice and time. In 2018, radar from NASA's IceBridge mission detected a cavity beneath Thwaites Glacier, nearly the size of Manhattan and hundreds of meters tall. It was described as a void formed by accelerated melting. But its symmetrical contours a smooth, dome-like structure with evenly curved walls sparked debate within the geophysical community. The official papers avoided speculation, yet independent analysts pointed out that such regular geometry was rare in purely natural glacial cavities. It was as if the ice were melting along pre-existing lines, guided by shapes already there. The melting frontier has also uncovered organic relics, fossilized mosses, seeds, and bones preserved in permafrost. On Seymour Island, Argentine researchers found the remains of giant penguins over 6 feet tall, their bones showing patterns of heat exposure inconsistent with natural fossilization. The explanation offered was volcanic activity. Still, the discovery suggested the region had once been much warmer, possibly even habitable. In the McMurdo dry valleys, scientists uncovered microbial mats thousands of years old, still photosynthetic under thin ice sheets. These ecosystems, thriving in isolation, demonstrate how life endures extremes and hint at how it might have endured deeper below. Each melt season now brings new anomalies. In 2020, European Space Agency satellites recorded dark, linear markings stretching across East Antarctica's Nansen ice shelf. At first mistaken for shadows, they proved to be troughs filled with mineral dust traces of ancient winds carrying soil from exposed ground. Chemical analysis indicated the dust came from bedrock not exposed for hundreds of thousands of years. The discovery implied that melt cycles far older than recorded history had once revealed portions of the continent, only to bury them again. The Antarctic treaty nations monitor these exposures closely. Drone surveys and radar mapping projects are immediately classified, pending environmental review. When parts of the Shackleton Range became ice-free for several months in 2022, all aerial footage was withheld. Officially, it was to protect fragile microbial life from contamination. Unofficially, those who worked on the mission reported unusual magnetic interference near the newly exposed ridges. The readings echoed the same irregular frequencies recorded decades earlier near Wilkes Land. Low pulses, recurring every 16 hours, steady as a clock. The scientific community remains cautious in interpretation. Melting reveals, but it also distorts. When ice retreats, sediment collapses, reshaping the underlying terrain. What looks like design may be coincidence, a trick of light, erosion, or compression. Yet the patterns persist: concentric arcs in satellite images, grid-like fractures beneath translucent ice, and now long parallel ridges emerging in places where ancient cartographers once drew coastlines. The question grows more difficult to ignore. How could maps from the 16th century resemble the land now reappearing beneath the modern melt? Even those who reject the notion of lost civilizations admit that Antarctica holds something unusual. The continent is a geological archive reaching back to the earliest ages of Earth. Every degree of temperature rise exposes another chapter. Core samples, extracted in 2023 from the Denman Glacier Valley, revealed layers of volcanic ash mixed with fine silicate dust, evidence of a massive explosion roughly 12,000 years ago. The layer corresponds closely with the global cooling event of the Younger Dryas, the same period often linked to flood myths and sudden climate shifts in human prehistory. Across international research stations, quiet unease has grown. The data show acceleration far beyond early predictions. Ice that was supposed to last a century is vanishing in a decade. Satellite altimetry from 2024 recorded unprecedented thinning near the Amory ice shelf, exposing bedrock elevations that had not been measured since the 1,960 seconds. The revealed formations, broad plateaus, and circular depressions drew immediate comparisons to ancient coastal topography. The official classification was post-glacial erosion features. To others, they looked like the footprints of something built long before the ice. Each year, the frontier advances, the ice line creeping inward, the sea swallowing fragments of ice that once sealed the unknown. As the world warms, the Antarctic silence becomes less a mystery and more a countdown. If the ancient builders truly existed, their world may soon surface stone by stone, ridge by ridge, drawn out by the very climate shifts that threaten the present. For now, what lies beneath remains half-glimpsed, a continent changing faster than instruments can record, a vault cracking open under its own weight. Whether what emerges will be fossils, ruins, or only rock, no one can yet say. The ice is melting, and the Earth, for the first time in tens of millions of years, is beginning to show us what it buried: the vault beneath the dust. In the heart of Antarctica, beneath layers of ice older than civilization itself, there lies a silence so complete it defies comprehension. Scientists who work there often speak of it in quiet tones, not as an absence of sound, but as a presence. The ice absorbs noise, vibration, and even memory. It is a place where the Earth has kept its oldest secrets untouched, a frozen library sealed long before the first human gaze turned south. But as the ice recedes, instruments across the continent are beginning to detect something strange: signals, shapes, and echoes that suggest the vault beneath may not be entirely empty. It began with neutrinos, tiny, nearly massless particles that passed through everything, rarely interacting with matter. In 2006, the IceCube Neutrino Observatory, buried under 2.5 kilometers of Antarctic ice, began recording events that made no sense. Most neutrinos come from space, traveling downward toward Earth. But a handful of detections appeared to move upward, as if emerging from the planet itself. These were high-energy events, far too powerful to be produced by known terrestrial sources. NASA scientists rechecked the data, suspecting instrument malfunction. The signals persisted. In 2018, researchers analyzing data from NASA's Antarctic Impulsive Transient Antenna (ANITA) detected similar anomalies. Balloons flying high above the ice registered cosmic ray bursts rising from the ground below. The direction, energy, and timing matched no known pattern. The events appeared to come from deep within the ice, tens of kilometers beneath the surface, from places no radio wave should travel unscattered. When the findings were published, official explanations leaned toward rare particle physics phenomena, yet some researchers off-record called it an impossible echo. The signals grew more complex. Between 2019 and 2022, multiple stations Amundsen-Scott, Concordia, and Vostok recorded synchronized radio pulses occurring every 6 hours and 37 minutes. The frequency was constant. The source, triangulated through atmospheric analysis, pointed not to space but to a fixed point beneath East Antarctica, near Wilkes Land, the same region long associated with magnetic anomalies and mass concentrations detected decades earlier. The data were classified for review under international scientific protocols. When summaries were released, the recurring pattern had been omitted. To those who had been studying Antarctica's hidden landscape, the coincidence was striking. Beneath that same region, seismic mapping had long revealed a vast circular depression nearly 500 kilometers wide, a feature some geologists believed to be the scar of an asteroid impact. Others, less certain, described it as a collapsed crustal dome. When radar penetrated deeper, it revealed concentric layering rings and voids, like an immense buried structure. Ice core analysis from surrounding areas showed microscopic metallic dust, unlike any other in the southern hemisphere. The composition nickel, chromium, and a trace isotope of cobalt was not consistent with meteorites. It was consistent with alloyed metal. In 2024, a team from the European Polar Research Initiative conducted a silent expedition under the designation Project Seraph. Their mission, described publicly as a subglacial gravimetry survey, focused on that same sector of Wilkes Land. For 3 months, no updates were released. When the expedition ended, only one brief statement appeared. Survey complete. Data pending further verification. The team disbanded shortly afterward. Independent scientists later noted that several instruments from the mission gravitometers and radar modules were never returned to the project's inventory. What lies beneath the ice there is uncertain, but those who have seen the classified seismic profiles describe something that should not exist in nature, a dome within the crust, hollowed, symmetrical, and ringed by regular formations. One anonymous source from the European Space Agency called it the most geometrically perfect object ever recorded underground. Officially, no such structure has been acknowledged. Yet, the evidence, magnetic anomalies, unexplained neutrino bursts, upward-moving particles, and synchronized radio pulses continues to accumulate around the same coordinates. If it is natural, its perfection is beyond coincidence. If it is not, it may be the oldest structure on Earth. Scientists are cautious with language. They speak of lithospheric uplifts, density gradients, or crystalline cavities. But in private, some use a different word, vault. The shape resembles a chamber, a dome within a ring, sealed by layers of ice and sediment. Within its center, radar imaging shows a void of unusually low reflectivity, an absence so complete that it registers as silence on every instrument. It reflects nothing. It absorbs everything. For now, no one can reach it. The ice above is too thick, the equipment too delicate. But the melt is accelerating. Each year, new fractures appear across the polar plateau, exposing black rock and ancient dust. What lies beneath will not remain buried forever. In 2025, a final data release from IceCube contained one quiet line of text among millions of entries. Event 325476, Wilkes Sector Energy 10, 18 electron volts, upward trajectory, verified. It was the most energetic event ever recorded. The neutrino did not come from the Sun, a supernova, or the galactic core. Its path began within the Earth and ended in the Antarctic sky. Whatever dwells beneath the ice does not move, but it speaks in particles, in signals, in the slow language of the planet itself. The vault waits, sealed under time, pressure, and the indifference of cold. Whether it holds the remnants of a lost civilization, a geological impossibility, or something stranger, no one knows. The data will be studied, reinterpreted, and filed into silence, as every discovery there eventually is. Antarctica remains what it has always been, the edge of knowledge, the continent of unanswered questions. The machines still listen. The ice still hums. And deep below, past the reach of sunlight and sound, something older than history continues to exist unchanging, unseen, and waiting for the world above to remember it. The deeper we look beneath Antarctica's ice, the less we seem to understand. The signals, the magnetic distortions, the perfect geometry sealed in darkness, all of it points to something older than our history books will ever admit. For now, the answers remain buried, locked beneath miles of frozen time. But as the ice melts and the data grows harder to hide, the truth may no longer stay silent. Perhaps what we've called legend is only memory frozen, preserved, and waiting. If you've stayed with us this far, thank you for listening to The Quiet. There are still places on this planet that refuse to explain themselves, and Antarctica remains the greatest of them all. Join us next time as we journey deeper into the world's forgotten corners, where fact and myth blend into the same cold air. Subscribe, stay curious, and keep your light pointed toward the unknown.